evening, everyone. Welcome back to the Slanted and Decanted podcast. I am one of your hosts, Parker Story, and I'm joined by my good friend,
Cara Patricia.
We are recording from the Drink For Yourself studio in the beautiful SoMa West neighborhood in San Francisco, California. It is Sunday.
Sure is Sunday. It's always Sunday. I love Sundays. I love our Sunday records.
It's nice. It's a great way to wrap my shift. And honest, sometimes it can be preoccupying, like trying to get in the pod zone, which is difficult when you're, cellaring, dealing with guests, that type of stuff. But I don't know. We went down pretty well tonight.
You don't gotta.
We're getting it tight.
Get ready if you stay ready.
That's right.
All right, you gotta always be in the pod zone.
I was extremely ready today. I couldn't stop. Nonstop computer work, nonstop podcasting mindset. I think the fruits will be apparent.
Okay, question.
Yes.
You know how we do this podcast every Sunday?
Yes.
We've been doing that. Have you heard about those people that live stream their daily life? They're constantly live streaming themselves?
I've seen a lot of people do that actually.
And they make $1,000 a day sometimes, but they're constantly live streaming. They're walking around dressed as a weeb downtown with
They call them NPCs. I've seen one kid who's constantly in character as Spider-Man.
All day long.
Yeah.
That's their job.
I've seen a lot of parents scrimming at their teenagers about it, trying to get them to break character.
Really?
Yeah, it's really funny.
On YouTube or something?
Yeah, well, on, X. Other video sources.
You're not allowed to be on that anymore.
I'm always on X.
Listen, we are counting down to the days. If we get 1,000 subscribers, Parker will quit X.
I can't, and I know that it's because our mutual and deep shared hatred for Elon Musk, but we have different tacts. We're different people. Where if you've fully divested and blocked him from your memory, I am keeping close tabs on him. And I'm inside. I'm in the mix. I want to know what he's doing at all times. It's never good or funny, but
God, it's a mind virus.
He's still posting memes that are bad, 2010 core memes
and anti-Semitism.
Yeah, but he always does the
Yeah, but
well, I don't think that I'm getting osmotically affected by it. If that's your concern. No. But his particular brand of bigotry on there is funny because he never says anything that's outwardly bad. He'll find a post that someone has said something crazy
or says something "Oh, you speak the truth."
Oh wow, that's interesting or concerning. It can be someone posting the protocols of the elders of Zion, and he'll be like, this is interesting.
Yeah.
It's very crazy.
God.
He's a huge piece of shit. But I have seen quite a few NPC style TikTok kids and live stream kids. They live on their lives. They make a lot of money. There was that one woman, I think a couple of months ago, who went viral. She ended up in a couple of magazines because she was making, several $1 million a year pretending to eat sushi on the internet. Cool.
I need to figure out this niche. Somebody told me that if we live streamed Decant, that they would pay money to watch it all day. Just what's going on here.
Whoa. Who
and
told
I was
you that?
One of our creepiest friends.
Yeah, I was going to say, that sounds sus.
One of our creeps that we love. But they no longer live in San Francisco. So they were they felt a little left out. And they were if you live streamed, I would follow it. And
they
I'm
want to be able to remote.
That's a huge security risk for a small business to just constantly be live streaming your business. Letting people see the ins and outs of your locking mechanisms, your security systems, et cetera, when you're there, when you're not there. But I wish I had the... I feel like I have, I feel like I grew up with this thing that's called humility or shame or intense insecurity, where I'm not harnessing that I can't find, I don't understand how people can harness that and push it outwards.
Push it all out, yeah.
Right?
I can't either.
If I post too many stories, if I get stoned and I post one too many stories, repost one too many stories in a row, last night, I go through them and I delete them embarrassingly.
I was channeling you last night because you do get to posting in the late hours, and I have the same mechanism where I'm oh, that's cringe. Why am I revealing this part of myself? But it's well, everyone's doing it. I might as well do it too. But I told you when we started the podcast, I'm not camera shy at all. unless I'm holding the camera myself. It feels very strange. You know what I mean? The like vertically aligned front facing camera oeuvre is like not for me. It's hard. It's difficult to. It's like a fourth wall that you own yourself.
You know what
you're
made
behind
me
it
less,
and on the other side.
The thing that made me less nervous about it was not only like having my own business and trying to like advertise some shit every once in a while, but when I broke up with my ex-partner, all of the sudden I was like, I noticed, like you can even see it on my Instagram. It's like we broke up in like 2019. All of a sudden I started taking selfies again. And like I started like also like online dating for a little while too. And it was like all of a sudden you're living kind of outwardly again, more personally. But that being said, I do find it very cringe as an adult. And
it's hard.
But I get a lot of positive feedback from people. People say to me, people will come in here and be like, you're so funny on your stories or whatever.
Yeah.
And I'm like, first of all, like and subscribe. Like, tell the algorithm you like it. Don't tell me personally. Like, I don't care about you telling me personally. Like, make the algorithm know.
Yeah, I don't have time for this conversation. Leave a comment.
Leave a comment.
No,
like,
I came into the shop the other day and I said,
Save.
hey, we're getting a lot of positive feedback on social media. It's so strange. I'm used to people threatening me or trolling me because of, what I get up to on the internet, which is just trolling people and hanging out. But it is nice when you read like an earnest comment and someone's like, hey, great job. I'm like, oh, wow. Really?
Yeah, I don't believe any of it. I'm definitely going to read the comments and I am going to hunt down the people that say anything negative, find them, and then call their bosses and say, is this the type of people you hire?
We do have a guest tonight. Her name is Simi. Simi is a co-owner and sommelier at DECANT San Francisco here on Folsom Street. Bringing Simi in to have a little bit of a dialogue about some interesting stuff we've read in the press regarding sommelier work and sommelier culture. Here at DECANT San Francisco, we like to keep things pretty casual and chill when it comes to wine service and our general ambiance. But that doesn't mean that a lot of hard work doesn't go into what we perform and do for ourselves and for the community every single day. Fine wine is about a lot of fine details. Oftentimes, and that's really important to, I know myself, and I think Cara as well. But I did want to talk with you, Cara, about an article that's kind of making the rounds in the community and the Instagram wine space and its appendages. It's from Punch, and you sent it to me, I think. I didn't dig it up, but when you sent it my way, it reminded me that I'd read something from the same author a few years ago. And so I'm interested to see what you think about this particular piece.
Why don't we do this with Simi with us?
Yeah, I think we should invite our guest into the bar and figure out what's going on in the greater world of being or not being a sommelier.
And welcome back to Slanted and Decanted, the only podcast that Cara and Parker produce in West SoMa at the moment.
The only one.
Just one so far. Again, I'm Cara Patricia. With me, as always, is Parker Story. And today we have a little guest. A little guest. Just a little guest. We've got my business partner, my friend to the end. We got Simi Grewal here. Simi, welcome to the pod.
Thank you. Thank you for having
Say hello to
me.
everyone.
You would think I would know more about this podcast by now, but no. This is my first time being exposed to whatever goes on inside my business. So
Sunday nights.
thank you for having
We try to make it so that you don't know that we're here on Tuesday mornings.
me.
We try to.
Most of the time.
How's that going?
Like 8 out of 10 actually.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
That's solid.
Yeah, pretty good.
B student for life over here.
We're drinking a wine from the decant shelves. We're always drinking wines from the decant shelves for now. Maybe one day people will send us some wine. Parker picked this wine. This is a Pet-Nat. Sorry, guys. We're going there. Pet-Nats. I said Pet-Nat was dead, but Pet-Nat's not dead. This is the original Pet-Nat. Methode ancestrale. We have to remember that Pet-Nat is not a new thing. It is a method that is ancestral.
Yeah, it's the way the game used to be played back in the day.
Yeah, it is the way that
That's
wine.
good.
It's the first way sparkling wine was made. I'll give you a quick rundown. Champagne, for example, Prosecco, Franciacorta, Lambrusco, all these different things. All these like fancy, famous sparkling wines are made with 2 fermentations. First, you make a still wine for the most part. Then you move it over to a tank or another vessel or a bottle, and you add a little bit of yeast, a little bit of sugar back in, cork it up, let it hang out. Yeast eats any leftover sugar, and bubbles happen. That's like a part of it. If you need more detail, I'll put a link in the bio. But that's basically it. The ancestral method, or the Petit Natural wines, they typically have 1 fermentation. So you start by picking all your grapes, crush them, you start fermenting them, but typically you sort of bottle them before fermentation is complete.
That's right.
Modern fermentations for Pet-Nat can be a little bit different. Sometimes they are transferring it into a bottle a little bit later. Sometimes they're disgorging it, etc., etc. But the old school way is you're not disgorging it. You're going to have a little haze. And sometimes you can have bottle variation on residual sugar as well. That is just the natural way. We can talk about it more. This is one of those wines.
I'm partial to this method and this style. I think the variance is intriguing to me, as well as just the storied nature of the process. Your thoughts on the wine, Simi the Somm?
I actually really enjoy this wine. You know, a lot of people know I'm not a super naturalist all the time. Cara has a little bit more of that persuasion than I do when it comes to some of the wines on our shelves. But, you know, we taste things blind, and this was one of those rare wines that when I was told it was a Pet-Nat, I was like, oh, okay, I'll see you. But I love this wine. It's 100% Cabernet Franc, but made in a Blanc de Noir style, and it's just totally delicious and fresh, and a lot of consistency from bottle to bottle. So I really enjoy this one. I think it's a great Sunday night quaffable, delicious little thing in a bottle.
And it's all Cabernet Franc, 100% coming from the Loire Valley. It has a little juiciness to it. It is like very dry.
Super duper. It's 2016.
Oh yeah, it has a nice.
The end of history, depending on who you ask. The wine's really good, and I'm glad to have your high clarity, concise thoughts on it, like only a practiced somm can deliver.
Well, you know what's nice about this Pet-Nat is that it still is very alive. Like you can tell that it is kind of changing, and that's not just because of its unfiltered, you know, kind of yeasty quality, but it has a lot of fruit that's constantly kind of evolving. When we first opened it, it was like so like tight and fresh, and now it's like tastes kind of like a pink apple, and it's kind of moving into other parts.
It's actually really reminiscent of the weather today. I mean, today was one of those like perfect crisp fall days in San Francisco. And I think this wine is kind of in that like very like pink lady apple and kind of like just light toasted spices. It's really expressive. It's got all that kind of tart cranberry. I'm enjoying this one a lot today. Good pick. Good pick, folks.
Good work. Super
I
clean.
wanted to go with the Loire theme. I'm really enjoying how the activity of the Petillon has kind of wicked off a little bit, but the mouthfeel is still very like fuzzy, and like that's very very active.
Fuzzy.
Like really cool. Yeah, I like the rainy day take too. That makes a lot of sense.
So while we taste this and we start talking a little bit about, you know, your wine history, we've kind of touched on a little bit of Parker's my own. We'll continue revealing ourselves to our listeners and who we are. Like a bio can only say so much, and us trauma dumping can only say the rest.
Right.
But Simi, now it's your turn. I don't want to ask you the shitty question of how did you get into wine, because I'm sure you have a spiel already for that.
Mm-hmm.
I know I do. But when did you realize, at what point in your career did you realize that wine was going to be the pathway you took as opposed to anything else in sort of food and beverage hospitality or any other side?
My experience with wine really started when I was in school with you, Cara, at the Culinary Institute of America, because I ended up there knowing that I wanted to work in the restaurant industry, but not really knowing I at all had a passion for wine specifically. And it was my formal training and study in the world of wine that set me off on this path that when I graduated from there, I said, this is it. This is what I want to do. Yeah, I love food. I love eating, but I want to be serving wine. I want to be drinking wine. I want to be learning about wine because of its tie to history and, like cultures around the world and, all this amazing stuff that it exposes you to. I think that world of wine really opened my life up to many, many things that I never ever would have learned if I had not ended up in this field. But it was actually the formal training that I did sort of as a move to say, okay, this is going to expand my career in hospitality, that really led me down oh, wait, it's not just about hospitality. I want it to be about wine.
Oh, so when you went, we met at the Culinary Institute of America in Greystone in Napa Valley. So when you went there, because you were like, what, 22? 24?
I was 22 when I started that program.
And I was like 27. I was going back to school. And so for you being 22, you didn't go in there being like, oh, I want wine to be my career. That's very interesting.
I knew next to nothing about wine when we started that program. And I don't think you remember it, but I remember, you might not remember this, but I remember there was a day when one of the syllabus programs for the day had something to do with tokai. And I had never seen that word in my life. And I had done like the pre-reading the night before, and I came in and I said something about tokaj.
Oh.
And you said, oh, actually, it's pronounced tokai. And I was like, wow, there's no way I ever would have known that unless somebody told me that, because till that point in time, I'd only ever read the word. I'd never heard it out loud. And so like that is the extent of how much I did not know about wine going into it, but I absorbed it like a sponge because I still had a baby brain.
Now I have a question. When I told you it was called tokai, not tokaj, did I make fun of your pronunciation about it? The way that you do about everything I pronounce?
What do you think, Cara?
I mean, you still said it with a pretty heavy Chicago accent.
It's called tokai.
That's exactly what, yeah. And imagine 12 years ago, your accent was far worse than it is now.
I don't know about that. I don't know about that.
I don't think you made fun of me, but you definitely said it with sort of an elderly swagger.
What was the implication?
I went there with the feeling that I was going to be the least knowledgeable person there, and I was going to be way behind the curve on everything. And that turned out not to be the case, which I didn't really understand for a while until the proctor, the teachers of it asked me to like tutor some people on wine. And then I was like, oh, maybe I'm actually kind of good at this. It took me to like the encouragement of someone to be like, oh, you think I'm actually really good
getting
at
that
this?
green light is like, what? Really?
Yeah.
Okay, you know.
And then I went into the culinary section and I just crashed and burned.
Yeah.
That was fun to watch.
You do good. You get a little crazy with it in the cheese kitchen.
I'm yeah, I know. Parker's told me I'm the worst sous chef. I get it. Like, I know.
I said worst line cook in San Francisco.
Oh, yeah. Which is saying a lot.
Thank you.
I believe that.
No, and that's valid. I mean, you have so many other talents.
This is a wheel of cheese, like she's breaking down like an entire cow.
Eats every part.
Just like a cleaver.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting to hear that there are, contours and like unknown elements about your time even together at school. And I think that evidence is something that I really wanted to highlight throughout this discussion, because wine work is very involved. Mm-hmm. It takes up a lot of brain real estate. It's something that I spent years doing from a young age. Similarly, I think I was 22, 23 when I got my first wine job. And I always approached it as like, this is my job. I don't know, like I should learn all this stuff because I'm working now. And, it was a year or two later before I kind of opened the door and realized how deep and nuanced the community was. And I was like, oh, this is a whole big deal to a lot of people, which was not discouraging, but, having a non-traditional and mainly restaurant-focused path through wine and like a tertiary market without a lot of formal training, I encounter so many sommeliers in my life, just even in Kansas City, right? Where when I was coming up, there were 20 of them, 25 of them.
That's like, that to me is like a lot. Because one of the reasons I came here from Chicago was I felt like there are no jobs for sommeliers.
Really?
And how am I ever going to get the education that I want to have this be my career in a place where there's not a lot of mentors and not a lot of jobs?
Well, we had two master somms or one master somm, Doug Frost, and an itinerant. I think Aaron Fry was vying for MS. He might have nailed it already. I can't remember. These were like the big dogs, the old guys. Yeah. They ran around town, and I had a lot of respect for these dudes because most of them worked in supply to some degree.
Of course,
what I mean? And so I worked at a pretty big restaurant for that area. And so all of those guys were in and out of the door, and I was like, oh, those are the sommeliers.
Yeah.
I was being mentored by a guy who didn't really give a fuck about any of that stuff. And so I was like, I don't know, I'm just listening to you. But in my time traveling the country, living in different markets, specifically after arriving in San Francisco, and weathering the storm as a young person through the apparently never-ending natural wine thing, I've always anchored myself to academic, hardworking, classical sommeliers because they know what they're talking about. And even if they're very aware of the fashions of the day and what have you, the vertebrae of what we do is really about a deep understanding of where it comes from and why.
Yeah. What
is quality and what isn't. And that's why it worked out so well, I think, tonight to have Simi on the podcast, because I did want to talk to two sommeliers about some literature I read in the press pretty recently.
I would call it literature.
A couple of articles, actually. And I want to preface this segment to make sure that everybody knows that I'm not opening this dialogue to denigrate someone or tell them that their writing is bad or just get catty on the internet. I want to have a conversation about sommelier work, sommelier culture, and the itinerant things that surround it. And, working with wine, the good parts and the bad parts. One of those bad parts maybe being online hand-wringing about, what it all means. So without too much ado, I want to introduce you guys to an article I read in Punch that's getting quite a lot of attention in the online wine space, I'd say, amongst the sommelier community. This is on PunchDrink.com, and it's by one Miguel de Leon, and it's titled "So Long to the Quote Somm," unquote. Simran, were you able to read this article, or we talked?
I read it a few times. Yeah.
Okay. For posterity and also for the listeners' enjoyment and knowledge, I want to read a couple of words from it. And I'll say before we get started, it didn't give me like a ton of pause. In fact, I felt like I was reading an amalgam of several articles that I've read before. But I was intrigued by the outsized reaction in the community that I saw online. And then I decided to join the dog pile. So that's why we're recording this podcast.
That's not why we're recording this podcast. This just happens to be our topic for this weekend.
Fair enough.
Simi was on the books for today, long before this thing was.
Yeah, as I mentioned, I think it worked out quite well.
Cheese. Oh, no.
The article opens, "Are you a somm? Most people know me as the person serving them wine at the restaurant, so ostensibly yes, but to be honest, I don't fucking think so. About 10 years ago, the word sommelier was in the middle of both a PR glow-up and an identity crisis. Before 2012, the sommelier was fairly straightforward to define. He, and it was generally a cis white hetero man, oversaw the shoulds of wine service. serviette in hand, giving the wine list to the man at the table, pouring for the ladies first. He probably wore a suit or a fancy apron and was deemed a sommelier by way of Eurocentric pay-to-play certification programs. He probably earned his keep in a fine dining room that lauded the correctness of pairings and had access to a deep cellar of wines that contributed to his education. Oh, the horror. Then things got complicated. Wine culture was slowly inching its way into mass media, most notably with 2004's Sideways, which illustrated that there wasn't much of a divide between the connoisseurs and those who just wanted to get drunk, and later in 2012 with Somm, which documented the industry's bookish pursuit of perfection. The latter helped introduce the word Somm to the public and cement a new image of the Somm as some who partied like an honor student, who kept up with the grades but knew how to throw down a loose tie and an open bottle on their person any old Thursday night. At the same time, the then exploding natural wine movement, which wanted to clearly cleave from that fine dining world, developed its own attitude toward the word. Patrick Cappiello, whose career spans stints at Tribeca Grill, Veritas, and Gilt, would become the poster child for this shift when he opened Pearl and Ash. He eschewed the suit for a Black Flag t-shirt and jeans, and often wielded a saber, which he dispatched to open bottles of sparkling wine atop the bar for whoever asked. His wine list was over 80 pages and featured many of the same wines that were considered fine and rare.
One thing I do love about Patrick Cappiello that this article does mention is, him in his Black Flag t-shirt and being able to just like wear jeans and be at these events. He did, I think, help the next class of sommeliers, in which I think I was a part of, because he was already very well established when I was still kind of coming up in my San Francisco career for sure. And being able to see him do what he was doing, presenting himself the way he presented himself, and also being seen as an expert in his field was very inspiring to me to stop trying to play this, I live in California now, I'm going to be business casual from the Culinary Institute and try to change myself to be able to fit into this industry better. And it really freed me up. Seeing him was very freeing to be more of myself, which when I saw him looking like him, in his t-shirts, in his ripped jeans, and drinking, Jamais, I was like, oh, I could look like that and still be taken seriously. So I think a big part of this industry is, when you are young and an insecure somm, is being worried that you're not being taken seriously based on how you look. And that is a huge part of everything in some way, because you are, for most part, you are working with very fine things, with very fine people. You're basically the downstairs people working with the upstairs people, serving the upstairs people. And how you present yourself is going to be was always going to be how you were perceived, and whether or not you were taken seriously or not.
Yeah, that's a lot of actually what I was pulling from this article. And Patrick's a friend, and I think he's done a wonderful job with creating some real needle movement and material change in that conversation that's regularly had about accessibility. Because I agree with you, watching Patrick do his work when I was young, I was like, oh, I'm going to wear a t-shirt behind the bar tonight. I'm glad that you mentioned those things specifically about Patrick, because the article kind of goes on a little bit of a water slide down towards the bottom that ends pretty abruptly with suggesting that, in my view or in my interpretation of it, perhaps that there's not a need for the academic rigor surrounding sommelier culture and sommelier work. Perhaps that there isn't a need for the decorum that I think is extremely important to the spirit of hospitality in general, frankly. So the author of the article goes on to mention that due to the, described rote inequality and, disproportionately distributed, jobs and access in the industry, that there was kind of a flashpoint in 2020 wherein COVID-19 shifted what a lot of sommeliers were thinking about what their work meant. Patrick's quoted here saying that the pandemic shifted things in different directions. People who were in mentorship positions were forced to do something else, and everyone got time to think about quality of life.
Mm-hmm.
If this was something you loved, you kept doing it. The article then gets into some stuff about other events in 2020 that I feel are kind of spoken about flippantly. This is kind of something that's been happening in journalism in this space for several years now, that, if you basically, I'll cap it this way. If you wake up thinking that you need to write an article about natural wine, you probably don't need to mention George Floyd. The two things are, I think, to be like wildly disparate. And De Leon, throughout this article, I think is maybe grasping a little bit to try and take this grievance and attach it to something that's a little bit more universal. And he continues that the aftermath of George Floyd's murder was another culprit of this new Somm world that he's describing. After an infamous cheating scandal, a racist incident involving two teachers who insisted on being called master, in a sexual harassment case with the Court of Master Sommeliers, it was clear that the industry needed a self-reflection, and still does, parenthetically, and a critical reset about who gets to be part of the wine world. This is the part that I really wanted to discuss with y'all, because there is, at this point, kind of this pitch about doing away with perhaps the title of sommelier, or maybe consciously removing some of its importance. With more distance and experience, I hasten to further myself from the crunchy cultural attachments that come with the word sommelier. I've never been particularly attached to sommelier, and while at one point in my career, I willed my hardest to embody what it meant to be a somm. Currently, I call myself the wine director. Another sommelier calls herself the proprietor of her business. Cappiello has eschewed the term to make wine. So go ahead, sommelier, wine person, wine enthusiast, wine DJ, whatever you want to call yourself. If wine's on the table, someone's got to open it. Might just be you.
My initial response to this was about 15 responses on the Instagram that I had to constantly delete.
You were deleting, typing, and deleting.
Because my annoyance. I mean, I did read the article. I'm not like one of these people that just comments without reading an article. But I was very, very annoying. I was very, very annoyed. And I probably deleted my response 15 times until I had it less filled with grammatical errors and, being glib or flippant or whatever. But I am a sommelier, Somm, whatever you want to call it. And that's because it's a title I earned. And I worked incredibly hard. Mm-hmm. I did spend a lot of money. And I had to elbow my way into spaces that were not traditionally for me. And I'm still paying off debt for it. Fine. But I'm really, really good at this. And for coming from a family that was not part of this world, that did not grow up with wine on the table, of really being a first generation college graduate, it was really important for me to go through all of the steps to pursue a passion that I thought I needed to be taken seriously. Mm-hmm. And academics and merit do mean something in the sommelier world.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of industries where merit still wins. And in the wine industry, merit is very, very important. I don't find these certifications to be pay to play, because you have to earn them. Yeah. Cheating scandal or not.
I think, I think all of us sitting here can say we didn't come from backgrounds where wine was consumed every day. Mm-hmm. And I think the big thing here is this conversation about whether or not the word sommelier is important, I think is a bit ridiculous, and honestly kind of just chips away at a level of professionalism that all of us have been working really hard to establish for decades, and a level of legitimacy towards our industry. Because I think any restaurant work for a very long time was considered, oh, you couldn't become ABC, other thing, whatever, that requires a degree or requires a long time of study. I mean, I come from a family of doctors. I'm like a classic first generation Indian kid from the East Coast whose entire family works in the medical field. And the day I graduated from college, my mother said to me, well, if you want to go back and do pre-med, we can talk about it. And I was like, well, no, absolutely not. I have a degree in the business of food. Yeah. Right. And like, I think that saying something like, oh, the word sommelier is poison, or, you know, is not important or is antiquated, really, does a disservice to the industry, because as an industry, the restaurant industry, the food industry, the hospitality industry, we need to be working to raise the level of professionalism, because at the end of the day, that means that it raises wages and recognition for all of us, and we can work towards becoming an industry that is legitimized. And having titles like sommelier are important. You know, like, you want to call yourself a wine jockey or whatever. Okay, I don't want a bookkeeper filing my taxes. I want a CPA filing my taxes. Right? And I think that that's kind of the level of distinction here. Like, yeah, you might have the skills, but do you have the practice? You know, and when we talk about things like, oh, wearing a suit is uncomfortable on the floor if you're working as a sommelier, it's like, okay, but we also work in hospitality.
Yeah, that's true.
And the core of hospitality is making your guest feel comfortable. And if your guest is walking into a 2-3 star Michelin restaurant, they do want to see somebody who is in a nice suit, who's dressed up, and it looks nice, who can talk to them. Because you know what? I have worked in 3 Michelin star restaurants. I have worked in Michelin star restaurants. Like, every guest, you treat them like they have saved up an entire year to be there.
100%.
Yeah.
And that level of professionalism, your guest deserves that.
Yeah.
And
I think for sure.
I, as a woman of color and a young woman of color, when I started working, certainly got my own fair share of nonsense from certain guests. But I always took such pride in being able to say, I'm the sommelier. I can assist you. That's a title I earned. And it's a practice, you know, like it is just because you completed a course doesn't mean you're a sommelier. A sommelier is a working title. You take inventory, you clean up bottles, you do cellar work, all of that stuff. That is being a sommelier. It's the practice of the work of maintaining a cellar, of serving a guest.
And knowing what you're selling and being educated, being able to answer questions, be able to actually help. I think the difference between a wine gal or a wine jockey and a sommelier is, I feel like a wine jockey is gonna pour stuff that they like that's there. A sommelier is gonna pour what you want. Yes. And it's gonna listen to you, the guest, and it's going to find out what you are into and bring that to the next level.
And take pride in the fact that they are bringing the guest the experience they want.
Yeah. A sommelier is to make everything better.
I'm super duper inclined to agree, because I think that there is this kind of flattening and unification of all labor that's happening right now, where people, I mean, I think that there's maybe like a force at work that is flattening people's expertise, and not to get all tinfoil hat, but this type of eschewing of, you know, very hard work and dedication and academic rigor is super ominous to me. It's the same to me as when, like, conservative reactionaries get on Substack and start being like, stop sending your children to college, they're being indoctrinated. Like, it's like learning is important.
Learning is important.
It's extremely important. I have children, right? And, you know, children they're sneaky. They're always trying to get you to do something without them having to do any work. My daughter's a proficient reader. She'll run up and be like, Dad, will you spell this word for me? No, you know how to spell it.
Yeah.
Practice. Do it again. Do it 25 times. Yeah. I know that you know. But, you know, to your point about, you know, the different levels of expertise and why they're important, like, I've never Like nobody's like, oh, my car broke down. I need to take it to the vibe curator. Like what the fuck? You know?
I want a good mechanic.
Yeah, like I'm taking it
Yeah,
to.
I don't
want
someone that like works on their car for fun while they're doing 4 other things and trying to launch a podcast. Like I want.
Yeah, I mean that guy's probably a good hang, but
exactly.
like,
yeah, it's like but you don't want your dealer to hang out too long. You know,
Mhm.
it's like you want someone that is actually professional. If I do feel very Ron Swanson and Parks and Rec when he like goes into like a Home Depot and says like, "Can I ask you for something?" I'm like, "I know more than you," like walking away.
right.
But like, I think part of that's just because I've done nothing but study wine, and I really try not to be annoying about it, and I really try not to shut people out. In fact, I want to bring people into it. So many folks are like against certifications and things now, and it's like, why are you against certifications? Because there were a bunch of fuck ups, and because an organization didn't like fix everything as fast as they should have. Yeah, that was fucking annoying. I know a lot of those people that were cut out of a certain organization. I know a lot of people that weren't cut out of that certain organization that should have been. And then everyone's like, oh, you know what? We're going to get out. I'm going to stop going to the quartermaster sommeliers. I'm going to start taking my W set. As if a organization based in London isn't just full of old white guys and full of old bullshit as well.
Part of why I found this article to be strangely timed, because it's not a new conversation.
No.
None of the points brought up are like brand new. In fact, there's a timeline on the article and it goes back several years. But it's at the end of the day, what you're trying to say is let's delegitimize the only working term we really have that is recognizable universally, that allows people to kind of understand what you do.
Yeah.
And I think that's really the heart of that conversation. And to me, I'm really proud to be known as a sommelier. And I think it's aggravating and it's insulting when somebody tells me this is an outdated word or a word that shouldn't be used, because it's like, well, what's your big game here? Like, do you want to work in an industry?
It's already gender neutral.
Do you want to work in an industry that is legitimized and like people can understand? Or do you just want to keep working in this sort of like hippie lifestyle?
Yeah, I mean, you're not like, okay, I understand, like, maybe you don't like the term sommelier because you're not one.
A chef is a chef, right? Like,
sometimes a chef is a cook, and you got to be okay saying you're a fucking cook. You don't have to be a chef. Sometimes you're a cook. Okay?
Some cooks are great chefs.
If you're a cook, be proud of being a cook. Don't say you're a chef, and don't be mad at a chef because the chef is a chef and you're just a cook.
Yeah.
Fucking be happy that you're a cook. Find some love in your life of being a cook. Call yourself a cook, but don't get mad at chef for calling himself chef.
Yeah.
Chef earned that title.
I do think that's a great door to open, because all of my old chefs that I've worked with, they're chef to me. The chef is the first word in their contact on my phone. When we talk and we're in a professional environment, like I'm saying chef, because that's, we did brigade at my old restaurants. Yeah. We do those rules, and I like it. I like making sure that person knows that I'm deferring to them where they stand, so that, and I'm offering that so that they do the same to me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And we work when there's mutual respect in your workplace, that shit doesn't matter to you. Like, that's the chef. Yes, chef, whatever. It's not, I know it's a meme now. But it's a...
But chef gets used towards sommeliers too, between sommeliers who are working together and that really, really, really appreciate and respect each other.
Yeah. I mean, it's the literal definition. I mean, it's like you're in charge.
Yeah,
you're the chief.
Right.
Like,
Exactly. Exactly.
So you mentioned Simi earlier, getting flack as, a young woman of color, tableside. And I wanted to circle back to that because you mentioned something that I applaud, and I also have experienced quite a lot myself. When you say you're getting this pushback and getting a little bit of shit from people, I've been in so many scenarios wherein that's bothered me quite a lot. But after some time, it became this, I knew that this is my house and they're in here looking for my stuff. So, as offended and pissed off and, maybe how this might change, my perception about like that table, that person, what have you. How did you, coming up as a young sommelier and specifically from your starting point, as you mentioned not having a lot of wine knowledge or next to none when you got into the field. What did that feel like as you climbed the ladder, and what did each one of those stopping points and those accomplishments and feel like, and what was your perspective when you realized that, I'm in charge. This is me. This is my shit.
I mean, certainly like when I started working in restaurants, I was a little shit.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't know anything about alcohol at that point. I was 21. I had just graduated college, but for whatever reason, I was put in charge of wine buying, and that's eventually led me to the Culinary Institute and to this program and becoming a sommelier. And then after that, I went back to New York and was working through Michelin, and that was definitely like traditional brigade system, learning levels of respect, really just like being in the trenches and getting shat on all day long.
Yeah.
But when I came back out to California, I worked at a really great Michelin star restaurant in Silicon Valley, and I got a lot of experience. And that was really where I encountered the highest amount of this sort of like, oh, bring me the sommelier. And I would be like, well, I am the sommelier. you know?
That shit's
and
crazy.
It, definitely, it was incredibly frustrating. But I think over time, it's really about like a confidence of the self.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's a matter of like, can you do the job? And maybe it's a little bit of an old school mentality, right? Like, being raised by first generation immigrants is sort of like, look, just put your head down, get the job done. And like, that's kind of like, quote unquote, what makes us a model minority, whatever. It's like, shut up and do the job. But I think in restaurants, particularly, that mentality is important.
Yeah.
Especially in Michelin star restaurants. It's like, if you're the one crying in a corner, you're not going to get a promotion. If you're the one who's like working 16 hours a day and like you're there till 3 o'clock in the morning doing the cellar work, yeah, that's a sommelier. And I obviously, like, after the pandemic, everyone is very conscious of work-life balance, and I'm on that train, absolutely. And I don't think that culture exists in very many places anymore because the demand is just not there in the same way. I think that the level of dining has become much more casual again, where like the fine dining sommelier is certainly a dying breed in the sense that it's not as in demand. But that feeling of, yeah, I know what I'm doing. It was really more about myself.
Yes.
Because at the end of the day, nobody's gonna look at you as a 25-year-old, brown woman and be like, yeah, she knows what she's doing. She can run this 250-page wine list, or like, understand that. Like, no, I mean, the amount of every night I would get told, hey, can you bring me the sommelier? And be like, well, I'm the sommelier.
The wording is always funny. It's, is there anyone here who could tell me something about this bottle of wine?
Yeah.
I'm like,
Me. Oh, look at me. I'm wearing a suit.
Yeah.
I got a dry clean just for you.
There's a little pin on it too.
This is one of the best Cabernet Francs I've had in a while.
Oh, it is good.
We did 2 Cab Francs tonight.
We blind tasted this.
Oh, you did? You brought it in blind?
We brought it in blind. It is a Becky Wasserman selection, which helps because, RIP to a real one.
Right.
It's probably the only time we're going to be able to blind taste any vintage of this wine before it blows up.
Yeah, this is the first vintage of this wine. The first, release. This is Clos Durandiere, and I'm sure I'm murdering that pronunciation.
I don't
Durandiere?
speak any French, but that's my guess at
Le
the pronunciation.
Etienne Bodet, or Bodet, Harold, maybe.
This guy's got provenance. So this is a 100% Cabernet Franc, 2020 vintage. It is from Saumur, so the heart of where all the good stuff happens. We got Clos, all the other big dudes.
Let's just start off by saying that Romain Guiberteau is his stepfather.
There we go. That's what I was looking
Oh, I
I
didn't
was
know
like, I
that.
knew there was that relationship.
And
Huh.
he was gifted this vineyard as a wedding present. Nepo baby. Hashtag
Yes, this is
Nepo baby.
This is a Nepo baby wine.
But let's just say something. All wine in Burgundy, the Loire Valley, Champagne, etc. Like, if we want to make fun of Nepo babies, we cannot drink French wine.
Yeah, I
Because,
was
like,
gonna say
the best of the best in Burgundy.
Nepotism
Yeah.
comes from the great
Napoleon.
We had a hat today, sold it auction
Joaquin
for
Phoenix in theaters
$2.1
by Apple TV
million
very soon.
Well, I mean, let's talk about nepotism and Napoleon.
Quick
The
wine
Napoleonic Code, right? Napoleonic Code was that your estate, when you died, had to be split separately amongst your children, right? That's why Burgundy's all fucked up. The only area that didn't really affect for some reason is Bordeaux. Seems like
That's right. Napoleon was the first Maoist.
You love malice.
Napoleon
I
was
love
great
Mao.
until he declared himself emperor.
What?
Okay, quick quiz though. Where was Napoleon born?
In Corsica.
The OG short king.
Yeah.
The OG short.
Yes. Shout out.
But this is why we hire sommeliers, because they know where Napoleon was born, and obviously that's important.
Speaking of brain real estate, Napoleon, I think about that dude a lot.
That's true. Everyone's
We should have
like,
let him
the
kill
Roman
all the other
Empire.
gentry.
Do you know how frequently my girlfriend makes fun of me for thinking about the Roman Empire every day?
The Roman Empire is something we
Every
think about
day.
all the time. And when those memes are going around, I was like, I do think about the Roman Empire every day. And it's not because I watched 300 or whatever. It's because literally wine is moved by the Gauls or by the Romans as they like enter Gaul. and
Fun
Germany.
story.
Yeah.
I don't know how to use the internet, so I never know when a meme is happening. And
Damn, that's cool.
legitimately driving home from Costco a few weeks ago, my girlfriend goes, "Hey, how often do you think about the Roman Empire?" And I just thought it was a legitimate
She got
question.
you with that organically?
Oh yeah,
Nice.
completely. I was
Your
like, I
girlfriend
don't
is so
know. I was
funny.
like at least once a day, and she died. And I couldn't understand why, and it took a full 3 blocks before she stopped laughing and was like, this is a meme. And I said, I don't understand the internet.
You don't know about memes. That's why you're so cool and balanced, dude.
She came here and she was like, "What's this Roman Empire thing?" So I just had to like show her
So
memes on TikTok.
Cara had to explain to me why she laughed for so long, and I was
That's
like,
really
"Oh,
funny.
okay, I get it." And
Yeah.
you know what? I still stand by my point that the internet is a place of evil.
Yeah,
It's bad.
We should get
Yeah,
rid of it.
It's bad, folks. We don't need it. And also, it's started to permeate
Yeah,
real
kids should
life
play in
way too
sandboxes.
much. Yeah.
Oh, well, if you like sandboxes, you should get
You
on
love open
Sandbox
AI.
Gaming.
Is it on the internet?
Yeah.
No, can't do. No, can't
Yeah.
do. I'm a puzzle kind of lady,
You
though.
love open AI.
If anybody
I love
wants to send me a
Sandbox
gift, I love puzzles.
A GIF?
No, like a puzzle.
Oh, a gift.
Yeah, a gift.
Oh, she was about to pounce on you. She was so ready to correct you.
Yeah, no, a gift.
It's Jeff. I don't
Almost
care.
had your ass.
It's Jeff.
I have a question about this article. So, like, my question is, after listening to you guys talk about this, and I read the article as well, but I'm wondering, like, I don't think the author was saying sommeliers, you should be called a sommelier if you don't have the training.
Right.
I'm questioning, and I want to know your guys' perspective on, do you think there's an issue with the word sommelier because it's inaccessible to like like the people who maybe aren't necessarily yeah, or like it's not as accessible to people who maybe want to drink wine. Like you hear the word sommelier and there's a connotation, and then some people are like, oh, this isn't for me. And it keeps specific classes and structures in place because people don't believe that wine is for them because it's only for sommeliers, which is this fancy French word that people don't relate to.
Sure. Good. I like that. Thank you, Chris.
That's a great question. And I had some meditations on exactly that this morning, and I made notes.
Please.
But the word accessibility is so important to the entire conversation around sommeliers because as sommeliers, we are hospitalitarians. Our entire job is to make everybody feel comfortable in the way that we can. So whether that means, I'm serving you a $700 bottle of Syrah or an $85 bottle of Syrah from the Rhone Valley.
Or $40 bottle.
Or a $40 bottle. I mean, restaurant, retail, whatever it is. That bottle should have the best intentions behind it because as sommeliers, our intent is to give you a glimpse of the best that that region might have. At least that's my intention. I can't speak for other sommeliers. My intention is to bring a taste of the classics to everybody in the best way we can. That's part of the reason why we opened Decant. And it's also really a major reason why we blind taste everything. And it's for that pure thing of how do we provide value? We are classically trained sommeliers, so we know what the good stuff should taste like because we have spent our hours working at the best restaurants in the country. And that's a sacrifice we made personally to advance our own careers. But now we've taken that experience and brought it to this retail environment where we still believe that anybody, including yourself, Sarah, who doesn't have really much wine knowledge at all, should be able to say, hey, I want a really good bottle of Northern Rhone Syrah. I have no idea what that means. I read about it, but I don't want to spend more than $60. Great. Here are some options for you from producers in that area, anywhere from $38 going upwards. And that is something that Cara and I do with a lot of intention. And that is the heart of being a sommelier, right? Is how do we make all of this accessible? Because we have worked at the places that are the most inaccessible. We've worked at those places where it's like every single night you're waiting on some billionaire or sommelier, or some celebrity. Like I have done that. I did that for years. So I know what those people drink and I know how much they pay for it. And I know it's not impossible for the everyday person to drink that way.
Yeah, it's like, with pins and suits and signifiers, it's easy to make fun of that stuff. I think when you're just being a fucking hipster about stuff but I'll say that in my work now, wherein I'm in control of like what I'm wearing, where I am, and what I'm doing, like it's significantly like less offensive if someone's like, hey, so like what's up with this? Do you know? Is there someone who knows?
Yeah.
Because it's like if I was wearing a suit and a pin and someone asked me that question.
This is like such an important conversation, right? Because it's instead of just like saying, hey, we're going to get rid of the word sommelier and throw it out the window, I think Cara and I, what we really aimed to do when we opened Decant was like take the word back.
Yeah.
Right? And like, it's like, okay, look, the sommelier doesn't need to be somebody running around in a sweaty, stinky suit like that's covered in dust from opening boxes. It can be somebody who is literally wearing whatever the fuck they want. But when I talk to you, you're going to be like, holy shit, you know a lot about wine. And like I can tell that every bottle on this wall or on this list has a significance and a meaning. And you know what? The people who are working here can tell you that too. That's the definition of a sommelier. It's like, okay, I'm cooking this for dinner tonight. What is the best thing that I should drink with it? And whether it's a $18 bottle or it's a $180 bottle, I'm going to give you my educated opinion and you can make the decision with the facts I presented. And I mean, honestly, like, look, whenever I travel outside of San Francisco, I always visit wine shops.
Yeah.
And it is shocking to me how many wine shops are being opened by folks who, when you look at the walls, you're like, why are these bottles here in this climate or in this room that has no air conditioning, but these wines have no sulfur on them?
Around where, like, I feel like if I walk in, some Zoomer is going to walk up to me and be like, "What's your body count?"
Yeah, let me tell you, there are a lot of places
like,
that
rate
have...
this wine 1 out of 10. Hey, where do you live? Can I take a tour of your apartment? It's just like, what the fuck?
There's a lot of
the vibe sucks.
Places that have opened, like this whole thing of maybe we don't want to call each other sommeliers anymore. And sometimes I think,
fuck you, I'm a sommelier.
Yeah. But yeah, well, fuck you, I'm a sommelier. And I'm not trying to be elitist and I'm not trying to be gatekeeping. I feel like this article is kind of being very gatekeeping. You're not.
Ironic.
It's not cool if you're still a sommelier. Blah blah blah. You're too buttoned up. You're too. You're. It almost feels like if you're a sommelier, you are okay with the white cis heteronormativity of the industry, and it's like everything that we're doing within the sommelier community is to bring people in. I want people to get a wine education, because when they don't, you can tell on the wine lists, you can tell at the wine shops, you can tell at the little restaurants where they don't want to hire an actual sommelier, and
No
they just
communication
hired a host
between the
that
style
knows some wine.
categories, no communication between each SKU,
Yeah, and
things
it's
that
like
are extremely
there's
popular and
and-
often 86 because they're popular.
And we hear people come in here, and guests come to DECANTsf, and they are surprised by the caliber of wine that we have, because they are not used to seeing that
4 or
in
5
such
people a day.
casual
This
place.
election's crazy. I tell people all the time, I say, lighter to fuller. The restaurant's inventory will read quite a lot like a wine list at a very good restaurant, because that's the training of the people who established the business.
I always say you shouldn't have to have white tablecloths and a $200 per person tasting menu to be able to have access to great wine. That's how I see it. I see us as a Michelin star restaurant wine list that has your bases covered for classics, and we have fun. And you know what we don't have? Fucking flawed bullshit that only people who don't know good wine think is delicious.
Yeah.
And we have people coming back in here so happy that they can get a real good bottle of wine that isn't going to be overwrought with VA. And let me just tell you something right now.
It's volatile acidity.
VA, okay? Volatile acidity. Let's stop pretending that outside of Amarone and maybe Barolo, that this is a part of terroir and winemaking. And Chianti, yeah. Outside of Italy, that this is a part of terroir, because I don't care. Yes, the climate is warming. That is not an excuse for volatile acidity to be in every fucking wine.
Understand science.
The climate change, quote unquote, is the COVID-19 of fucking wine writing. People will be like, oh, this is happening because of climate change. The way that anything that you read right now is well, this is bad and there's nothing we can do about it, but remember, it's because of the pandemic. Sorry. It's annoying. Simi, thank you so much for your commentary both on the wines and on the article. I was, I'm grateful, obviously, always to hear, experiences from talented and hardworking sommeliers. I think that is one thing that, I'm in this gray area, membrane area with all these natty kids, with I think whom I identify because of my my interests and my age. But I am a purist about wine, the same way that I am about good literature or a good record. You know what I mean? That they should cleave closest to the form if they are going to be considered art, right? Cara?
I had a really great mentor, and it's very lucky that you can have mentors. I had a really great mentor who got canceled. I had a really great mentor who said to me once when I was under his tutelage at the Culinary Institute of America, because I was also a hipster wine kid, believe it or not, just maybe a generation or a decade
I
beforehand.
just thought you were a stoner wine kid.
Well, I was that too, but I not to play I was into it before it was cool, but I was drinking Cornelis and Munjabel and Canobium and Guy Berthaud and stuff back when I was a fucking baby somm in 20.
Those are total 2014 ass wines to me.
Yeah.
If I'm being honest.
Well, which is fun
Probably
because
maybe earlier for
but
you.
I was drinking them in 09,
Yeah.
10, like in my,
I think-
before I came to California, right?
Yeah, current
And
release
I was-
Moonjabel and shit was like 11, 12 when I was like, oh, this is nice. I didn't think that would still be a problem when I moved out here 10 years
Right.
later.
And so like the interesting thing is like, and Mind Clang and all these other producers back in the
Mhm.
day. And when I came out here, I remember actually at the CIA, we were doing a chapter on, I think we were doing a focus on wines of like Eastern Europe. And we were in Georgia. And I remember we had a blind flight because every day we just did blind flights in the morning. It was like 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. We were just blind tasting wine and doing theory tests all day long. Like, we're talking school. Like, the Culinary Institute of America is no joke. It was intense. And like the fact that she knew the fact that she didn't know anything about wine, and then she graduated the way she did as a
That
certified
is a total
sommelier.
mindfuck. If you're
is
doing that stuff with her,
insane
Yeah.
to me, because I like that. It was like a master's program. It
Yeah.
is now a master's program in wine. So like not a master's sommelier program.
Sometimes I'm smart.
Oh my God. Well, that's the whole reason why I wanted her to open the business with me, because I was like,
No, I mean,
you're
that
the
is-
smartest person I know.
I'm an
that's
idiot
crazy
savant.
impressive.
So we were doing this like Eastern European chapter, and I remember they poured out these wines that were like little amber colored, little weird, whatever. And I remember this and them saying like, the proctors being like, who thinks these wines are flawed? And like most of the room raised their hands. And I didn't. And they're like, who thinks these wines are intentional? And like I raised my hand, and I was like, you know, honestly, I think this is probably like a Raxatelli or whatever however you pronounce it, from like
Crescent
Georgia.
wines, different
And they
coffee.
were like, yeah, that's exactly what it is. But it's because I was exposed to it, because I worked in Chicago and we were little hipster wine kids, and we were trying I had like my intro Somm at the time, and like we were just really trying to know everything. And it was so much easier to drink the natural wines, which we didn't even call that
No.
back then. We called it like farmer fizz or funky or like farmer wine. I don't even remember what we called it.
Can't
That
remember.
term
what it was.
natural wine is not what we used. But it was, well, obviously we used the term minimal intervention or non-intervention. We used those terms. And that was just like a part of what I grew up on. And that was sort of like the basis of what I did. And I had my first wine buying job before I even went to the CIA as a
Yeah.
green little baby. Like I get it. I wasn't a sommelier. I was a wine steward. Maybe I was a wine jockey. You know what I mean? Like back then, 25 years old, 26 years old, not really having a lot of education under my belt, really liking kind of the funky stuff. So it was easier to understand than hitting the books.
Yes.
Then I went to the CIA and I was like, no, I got to get serious about this shit. So I got myself an education. And I remember my mentor, my proctor, pulled me aside and he was like, name 3 producers from the Jura. And I was like, bam, bam, bam. Okay, name 3 producers from the Northern Rhone. And I was like, Gigal. And I couldn't think of any other ones. And one of the really great things he said to me, he was like, you have a really great wine foundation, but I need you to study the classics. And that really rang hard and true for me, because I was always the type of person who was like, I didn't care about Mark Twain. I read William Burroughs,
Right.
right? I liked the beat poets. I didn't like the classic American literature because I thought that was ingrained in the status quo, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I was a little bit more rebellious than that. And I feel like with wine, I went the same way in the beginning. But then I started tasting the classics and understanding the classics. And the classics are expensive. The classics are elite. The classics are hard to get your hands on. But there's a reason why they are the classics. Because they are the vertebrae to the rest of the body of wine. That's what everything else is really stemming off of.
Yes.
For sure. And so it's like, yes, I knew that this Georgian Raxatelli was not a flawed wine, and this was intentionally made this way because
Yeah.
I had tasted a bunch of them, but I didn't know anything about Gamay. I didn't know anything about Allemande. I didn't know anything at all about the champagne producers like Krug and Ruinart that led the way to everything else that we are at now. So it's like you need to study the classics at least to get an understanding. And if you're afraid of the classics, you're afraid of the barrier of entry, then you are never going to call yourself a sommelier, because you're not even going to try to read Shakespeare. You're not going to try to read Twain. I think sommelier is a career, wine viber is a job. And I think that's a big difference. And it really depends also on your audience, right? I'm a sommelier, I'm educated. I know that if all things fell apart here, I, as a quartermaster sommelier, as advanced sommelier, could go out with my experience and my level of education and get a really great job.
You could slay on Indeed
at a high-end place or a high-end buying job. I go to Las Vegas, run a fucking program because I have that experience, et cetera, et cetera. And they know from that me having passed that exam that I have X amount of proficiency and knowledge.
And you worked for it and you didn't stop till you had it. And that's important.
It's like you take your if you pass your master's of wine or your master sommelier exam, it's like it's our version of a master's degree in that sense, right? So it's like, and it's not master as in like I am the master of this group of people. It's master as in I have mastered mastery of a subject.
I think
anybody who wanted to be called master, by the way, like
cringe.
Master, fucking bait that shit out the door. That is disgusting.
It's very weird.
I remember when I was a baby Somm and people like calling people fucking masters, and I was like, you're fucking gross, like calling them master. Like
yeah, that's cringe.
Yeah.
That's very
you might as well just like wear a jersey with their fucking name
that's
on
very
the back.
that's very state school fraternity.
Yeah. And that's the thing, is like that's not what it really is. And people who really, really, really care about this industry care about it moving forward, care about it moving together, and care about bringing more people in, so that we don't just have a bunch of like fucking wine vibers that are just pouring natty wine to club kids. Yeah. Great. That's amazing.
I think
those
it's great
people
that they're
are
doing
not going to, those guests are getting them into wine. Fucking fantastic. But there's a lot of people in our generation that are becoming sober. And I wonder if there's not a correlation to all the fucking horrible wines that they've been getting served.
Nice. Yeah.
Because I don't know.
Rich generation.
I don't know anybody who's drinking Jamay
No.
that wants to go sober for fun.
No.
Like, you're drinking shitty stuff. You're going to take time to think, is this worth the calories?
I don't feel that great.
Right?
No.
I don't feel that great. I thought drinking natural wine wouldn't give me a headache. That's not the fucking reality of things. So be a wine viber all you want, but that's not a fucking career. I'm sorry. Being a professional sommelier, which comes from the very humble jobs of being a butler and or being somebody who worked service for a family. This industry comes from something old as time.
It comes from service.
It comes from service of people. It comes from taking care of people who are wayward travelers and spending time in your inn. It's coming from a time before restaurants, coming from a time when only the aristocracy could hire staff.
Yes.
And then they only hired people who then they would pay for them to become experts in wine and run their households.
Absolutely.
That's where we're from. We're workers.
Yeah, we wouldn't even be having this conversation if the pre-restaurant West was in recent enough memory.
Yeah.
We wouldn't be having this conversation if
our job is pre-Escoffier.
Yeah. It's crazy to think about all the time because I think I mentioned this to Cara earlier. You know, there's adages and catchphrases people like to say about different little wine trivia. You know, they use Madeira to toast the Declaration of Independence, and I'm always like, well, who do you think was pouring it? Slaves. Like, you know what I mean? It's like there's like if you want to you're trying to decolonizing a Western-based global market force is it's a goose chase. We live in these realities each and every day. All of our identities are fixed. And so, you know, I think that like allowing that to extend to wine, even though it is mystifying, magical, seductive, and curious, is fair. You know, at the end of the day, we need to be talking about this from, I think, a clear-eyed and like high clarity labor perspective. rather than applying a bunch of postmodern identity politics to it. I don't think it's fair to people who might want to jump in, and to have it be constantly advertised to you that, oh, it'll be too hard for you because of who you are. Everyone's sus. It's gonna suck. It's gonna be terrible.
Right? Like, I mean,
So,
I don't know, Parker. I feel like you and I probably had some sort of parallel experiences in the wine world.
Of course.
As far as people assuming that we don't.
Yeah.
know shit.
Why would I let those people stop me from doing anything?
Exactly.
I'm not gonna go home and worry about.
Prove it with your palate.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Exactly.
So.
I think that a conversation that probably found its way into print after a dinner party conversation over a bunch of old wine. I don't know.
It very much reads like a heart to heart.
It does read like a heart to heart. It does. It feels. I just have to say, it's like not every live journal needs to be a medium piece. Not every live journal needs to be a restaurateur's Instagram post. Like, we can just realize that we have some hardships and elbow our way through them and try to push really hard. We're better together. We're better when we're working together.
That's right.
And just get educated. Educate yourself on wine. Don't get mad because someone's a chef and you're a cook.
And if you're a
Be a
hipster out
chef.
there, think about how much better you'll feel when you're being a dogmatic asshole and you're actually right about everything you're saying. Let's go.
He's right.
Come on. It feels good. It feels great.
It feels really right.
It feels really great.
Also,
to prove people wrong.
Dismissing people on valid grounds it hits different.
Hang out
Just
more in California, all you New Yorkers. Like, I know that you had some time, but come on back. Things are changing. Things are fun.
This has been another episode of the Slanted and Decanted podcast.
Woof.
Thank you, Simi,
Thank you,
for
Simi.
joining us.
Simi Grewal, not like Siri on Apple says, Cimarran Grewal.
Thank you.
Cimarran.
I'm just gonna tell
It's
you.
very easy, Californians. Simi, like Jimmy.
Yes,
Not
it's not.
Simi.
It's not Simi.
Like Valley.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's super
Or what?
easy. Don't complicate it.
And it's Cara, like a car, or face in Espanol.
And my name's Parker, like
Parker.
Posey, or Robert Parker, or Charlie Parker,
The best of the Parkers.
or Parker from Alien.
Mhm.
Great movie. Follow us on Instagram at Slanted and Decanted Pod. There you can find a link tree for all of the links to our TikTok, Threads, Patreon account, and you will later find bonus content, including newsletters, bonus episodes,
Outtakes
me
of
ranting
shit we
about
can't
stuff.
put on YouTube.
Cara harassing me about joining Tech Somm. There will be a bunch of stuff going on later, and in the future, please like, share, subscribe. That's
Give us
youtube.com/Slanted and Decanted
money.
Pod.
On Patreon.
See you later.
Bye.
We're done. Good night.